Hello, Assalamu alaikum. This is Usama Hussain. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you will be fine and doing well. Today we have come with another topic, the fiction. So let's get started our topic. So guys, today we are going to the topic what is fiction and types of fiction. So let's start with our topic what is fiction and types of fiction. Come and go, time to hit the road, can't afford to watch time move past, never go. So, what is fiction? Fiction, from the Latin factio, a shaping, a counterfeiting, is a name for stories not entirely factual, but at least partially shaped, made up, imagined. It is true that some fiction, such as historical novel, a writer draws on factual information in presenting scenes, events, and characters. But the factual information in a historical novel, unlike that in a historical book, is of secondary importance. In fiction, the facts may or may not be true, and a story is known the worse for their being entirely imaginary. We expect from fiction a sense of how people act, not an authentic chronicle of how, in some past time, a few people acted. Reading literary fiction is not a mere passive activity, but one that demands both attention and insight, lending participation. In return, it offers rewards. In some works of literary fiction, such as Stephen Crans' The Open Boat and Flannery O'Connor's Revelation, we see more deeply into the minds and hearts of the characters than we ever see into those of our family, our close friends, our lovers, or even ourselves. Prose fiction comes in a variety of forms: fable, parable, tale, short story, and novel. We turn our attention to fable, parable, and tale. Short story and novel will be taken up for discussion later. So now let's get started. Fable, parable, and tale. Modern literary fiction in English has been dominated by two forms, the novel and the short story. The two have many elements in common, and in these handouts, a further discussion of the novel as a special form will be given later. Perhaps we will be able to refine the short story more meaningfully, for it has traits more essential than just a particular length. If first, for comparison, we consider some related varieties of fiction, the fable and the tale, ancient forms whose origin date back to the time of word of month. Storytelling, the fable and the tale are relatively simple in structure. In them, we can plainly see elements also found in the short story and in the novel. To begin, here is a fable, a brief story that sets forth some some pointed statement of truth. The writer Somerset Maugham, 1874 to 1965, an English novelist and playwright, is retelling an Arabian folk story. Samara, by the way, is a city 60 miles from Baghdad. The Appointment in Samara, 1932, W. Somerset Maugham. So this is a story. We would look at this, and you will get more points about that. Death speaks. There was a merchant in Baghdad who sent his servant to market to buy provisions, and in a little while the servant came back, white and trembling, and said, "Master, just now when I was in the marketplace, I was jostled by a woman in the crowd, and when I turned, I saw it was death that jostled me. She looked at me and made a threatening gesture. Now lend me your horse, and I'll ride away from this city and avoid my fate. I will go to Samara, and there death will not find me." The merchant lent him his horse, and the servant mounted it, and he dug his spurs in its flanks, and as fast as the horse could gallop, he went. Then the merchant went down to the marketplace, And he saw me standing in the crowd, and he came to me and said, "Why did you make a threatening gesture to my servant when you saw him this morning?" "That was not a threatening gesture," I said. "It was only a start of surprise. I was astonished to see him in Baghdad, for I had an appointment with him tonight in Samara." This brief story seems practically all skin and bones, that it contains little decoration, for in a fable everything leads directly to the moral, or a message sometimes stated at the end. Moral: haste makes waste. In the appointment in Samara, the moral isn't stated outright, it is merely implied. How would you state it in your own words? You are probably acquainted with some of the fables credited to the Greek slave Aesop about 620 to 560 BC, whose stories seem designed to teach lessons about human life, such as the fable of the goose that laid the golden eggs, in which the owner of this marvelous creature slaughters her to get the great treasure that he thinks is inside her, but finds nothing. Implied moral: be content with what you have. Another is a fable of the tortoise and the hare. Implied moral: slow, steady plodding wins the race. The character is a fable, maybe talking. Animals, as in many of Aspie's fables, inanimate objects or people, and supernatural begins. Supernatural beings, as in the appointment in Samara. Whoever they may be, these characters are merely sketched, not greatly developed. Evidently, it would not have helped Mogham's fable to put across its points if he had portrayed the merchant, the servant, and death in fuller detail. A more elaborate description of the marketplace would not have improved the story. Probably, such a description would strike us as unnecessary and distracting. By its very bareness and simplicity, a fable fixes itself and its messages in memory. Here is another example of a fable, The Camel and His Friend. This fable of an Indian origin and retold in English by I'm forgetting that name, but we will leave this The Camel and His Friend because we have studied the one already. Okay, so now come to the next topic. Okay, so the next topic we have the parable. Another traditional form of storytelling is the parable. Like the fable, a parable is a brief narrative that teaches a moral, but unlike the fable, its plot is plausibly realistic, and the main character are human rather than anthropomorphized animals or natural forces. The other key difference, as the parable usually possesses a more mysterious and suggestive tone. A fable customarily ends by explicitly stating its moral, but parables often present their morals implicitly, and their meanings can be open to several interpretations. In the Western tradition, the literary convention of the parable are largely based on the brief stories told by the Jesus and his preaching. The 43 parable recounted in the four Gospels reveal how frequently he used to form to teach. Jesus designed his parables to have two levels of meaning: a literal story that could immediately be understood by the crowds he addressed, and a deeper meaning fully comprehended only by his disciples, an inner circle who understood the nature of his ministry. You can see the richness of interpretation suggested by Jesus' parables by reading and analyzing the parable of the prodigal son from St. Luke Gospel. Now we have the next tell. The name tell, from the Old English tello, speech, is sometimes applied to any story whether short or long.